Hi, everybody, and welcome to Invisible Histories Project Talks, a series where we sit down with different folks doing LGBTQ history, archiving, and community organizing across the country. You know, folks that we just think are super cool. Today, we've got two great guests that are, longtime partners of us and that we really enjoyed working with. I'm Megan Sullivan, she, her, hers. I'm here with my colleague,
Josh Burford, he, him, his.
Catherine, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, your name, pronouns, where you work, what you do, any other fun things you'd like us to know?
My name is Catherine Champion. I work at BPL. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm the assistant archivist at Birmingham Public Library, Department of Archives and Manuscripts. Any fun facts about me? I enjoy dogs.
Nice. We might hear barking.
You might hear.
Yeah,
that's going to happen.
Connor, what about you?
Hi, I'm Connor Marullo, and I'm a project archivist who occasionally works with BPL. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I guess a fun fact, I really like science fiction and fantasy.
Well, you're living in the perfect time then.
Yeah.
I feel like we're all in a very poorly written science fiction, like post-apoc book right now. Like something, a YA book that the publisher's like, you have to do better.
Or this is a really well-written British book about America.
There you go. That's it.
It just gets really boring about chapter 3.
Right.
Wait, they're just staying at home? What is it? Animal Crossing? What?
Right.
I still have not jumped on that bandwagon, thank goodness.
I don't, well, you can't find a Switch, so there's that. So before we get into, asking some questions, I think it would be really good if Josh and Catherine, if y'all could kind of describe the partnership that IHP and BPL have, how long it's been going and kind of what it looks like so that our audience knows. And then Connor, if you could talk about what your role has been in that.
Yeah, so we approached, I think BPL was the very first repository we approached about becoming a partner for Invisible Histories Project. We had this sort of skeleton of an idea about what we wanted to do. I'd been working in Charlotte building LGBT collections there. And so we went, I think we thought we would have to do a much harder pitch. Than we ended up having to do, right? And so myself, Megan, and Jim Baggett, and then one of our other partners, Tim, we all went to lunch together. This was before I even lived back in Alabama. I was still living in Charlotte. And then we sat around a table and said, hey, we want to do this thing. And then Jim was like, yeah, let's do it. We got this. We want to be your partner. And so I think that was so easy at the beginning, has made our partnership so strong because it really has been a fully 50-50 partnership. And we're both supporting each other's work.
Yeah, I'd say we had started collecting LGBTQ material, but we just, because we're a public library, we just didn't have the physical resources. I mean, people and time, honestly, people and time to really do a good job of doing outreach to the community and building those relationships. So when Josh and Megan came, and we're like, we have the resources to build relationships and get material. We were like, oh, thank goodness. We can get what we need. And that has been really beneficial and a really great, I think it's been about a year, 18 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you guys have received the majority of the collections that we've gotten from Alabama. And I think, part of that is because I feel like our partnership is we're so open about what you can and cannot do, so that we don't feel nervous about approaching you with something that may be a little off the wall a bit and saying, hey, we've got this sort of weird thing. What do you guys think? And then we sort of work through it. But, I think you're right though, Catherine, because it's been interesting to watch how we've pulled together, some of your existing records. I'm thinking about the records from, the 20s and 30s when they were doing the site surveys of all the buildings in Birmingham.
Oh yeah, our Board of Equalization files, and using those to create kind of a trail and put a little bit more context into the collections we are building now.
Yeah. I think that is, to me, is one of those pieces of the partnership that I didn't have in mind at all, because I didn't know your collections that well. And I think that's what's been so strong, is like you all seeing what you have and then what we're bringing in, and how we can kind of overlap those two things together to sort of elevate everything.
Absolutely.
Connor, when did you first come on board working with us?
This would have been, I think, last January, with my as an intern, finishing up my master's at University of Alabama. I basically asked if I could intern at the Birmingham Public Library, and then Jim told me about the project that he had been talking about with you guys, and asked if I would be interested in processing those materials. And I thought it was a great opportunity, so I jumped on board.
I'm curious from my side of things, only because I get this like 5,000 foot view of everything, because I'm spending so much time with the donors. But I'm wondering, like, what, Catherine and Connor, what are you the most excited about that's been coming in as far as collections over the last like 18 months?
I'm really interested in those personal records, the diaries, the photographs. The literature is very interesting as well, but getting kind of a more intimate look at what life was like, I think that gives people a little more to get to grow on, to look at. Day-to-day experiences are really interesting for me. And I think they are really valuable source material for researchers.
Yeah.
I agree. I've really enjoyed going over the personal diaries, the different papers. In regards to Marullo's papers, it's her entire work history and everything that she's done for in this community. And it was very, very fascinating kind of seeing that all come together and seeing this entire narrative about someone's life and about this community and this culture. I also really enjoyed a lot of the newspaper clippings, because it would be very small things from the past 50 years or so, and you would really get this narrative that you otherwise wouldn't be able to see and wouldn't even be able to read unless you were, looking at this material.
Connor, was there anything that was like, and this is like such a dumb question to ask, but like, was there anything that you, as you were going through the collections, it was like shocking, like something you pulled out and you were like, holy crap, like what is this?
Yeah.
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 I mean, there was a ton, actually, not just historically, but politically speaking. Growing up, you always knew that there was discomfort and prejudice against the gay community, but reading those newspaper articles and actually seeing how people were reacting during this time to these people, I mean, it was very shocking. It was very horrifying. It was kind of uncomfortable at some points, because you're seeing a part of history that, is just not okay. And you are confronted with that very vividly. In some of the journals, you would see people's concerns about, well, should I come out or not? In these time frames, because you don't know if they were going to get beaten or worse. And there was also a lot of fear with HIV and things like that. I mean, it's a very visceral narrative. And there are good points, but really, I think what shocked me the most was just how brutal some of it was. It was a very discomforting feeling.
And Catherine, BPL's been collecting family histories for a while. Like, this is not new. I wonder, like, what do you think was the reticence of LGBT families to like give their stuff to an archive, especially a public library?
I think it's pretty straightforward. It's what Connor said. Even in 2020, there is some stigma and some danger around, you know, putting that out there and making it available to the public. And, you know, your full name in this age can identify where you live, where you work, like who you hang out with. It gives you a little more, it gives people a look inside your life that you may not want to look inside your life, right? That may use it against you as opposed to what it's meant to be used for. But I think you guys have done a great job in securing people's worries and making sure people understand that, you know, they're safe with us, and we are going to use all of our discretion to make sure that they continue to stay safe, and that the materials are going to be used for research purposes and not for malicious purposes.
Yeah.
But also that I think anybody is reticent to give up their pictures and their diaries and, you know, their stuff. People love their stuff.
Yeah, they do. They really do love their stuff.
They do.
Well, and I've been thinking a lot lately, you know, as we're going out and looking for new donors and new collections, you know, we have a huge working list. I think the research list now is like over 80 different collections, and this individuals and groups. But it got me thinking when you and Jim and I were talking about like adding more queer families into your, you know, Birmingham Families collection, it got me thinking about how like we often limit the coming out, to Connor's point, like coming out as this sort of, we come out as gay and then like we live this particular life. But I think there's a different level of coming out about our family structures and about how we've organized ourselves, right? Because we had to do that so often because our biological families in a lot of cases were just like dumpster garbage people. So we had to create our own families. And I think there's another kind of coming out, because when we ask people for family records, I'm not hearing, oh, I'm nervous about giving up my papers. I'm hearing, I didn't think you would want that kind of stuff. And so we're not imagining ourselves as part of the record, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that does apply across the board. I would say that is not unique to the queer community. People don't think that they are important in the historical record, which is kind of disappointing. Everybody's important in the historical record. Day-to-day life of an average person can actually provide quite a bit of research material and value. Especially in the queer community, though, I think the way people organize themselves, how, you know, queer families with children, what does that look like? And, you know, love letters are interesting always, no matter who you are. Love letters are fascinating, and personal diaries are fascinating and give a lot of color to a time period.
Right. Well, and Connor, I wonder if you mentioned Marge Ragona earlier. Like, is it, you know, because you just finished your program and, you know, you're getting out there. I wonder what it's like to work with a living donor, you know, like someone who has this huge history, who has kept this material history, but is like still so a part of the process. Like, what does that feel like, you know, as you're just getting started to be able to do that kind of work?
I mean, it's really exciting. And it's actually kind of nice because with some of these files, you can't ask the donor their opinions on things, or what did this mean to you? Why did you keep this? With a living donor and one who's willing to talk with you while you're processing this information, it's nice being able to really hear these stories that behind the scenes. So the story behind that photograph that you have, or why did they pick out that particular newspaper clipping? Why did they choose to use this article instead of that article? You really get to see the thought process, the consideration that went into their collection. And it really reflects on how they were in their community. I mean, you not only get the written narrative, but you also get the narrative directly from that person. And I think that is important when you can get it.
Well, I think people, I don't know if it's an archivist thing, but I remember in grad school, sort of talked about how disposable like newspapers, especially clippings and things were. But the longer I do this, but especially with queer people, the more I'm realizing that, and Megan and I talk about this a lot, that there is this folder full of clippings. And it's like that anything that they saw in the newspaper of any kind that was LGBT, they clipped it out and put it in that folder. And I can't help but wonder if they were sort of subconsciously or consciously creating a little like queer time capsule, maybe for themselves, but I don't know, maybe for some future human that might go through their stuff. And how exciting that is.
Absolutely. I know that with a lot of the newspaper clippings that I was going through, not all of them, newspapers just don't hold up as well.
Yeah.
They kind of bleed through onto other documents, or they just disintegrate over time. But I do really like those newspaper clippings because it puts you in those shoes, especially if you're getting a newspaper from like the 1980s, talking about political decisions that still have ramifications today. And you have that real piece of history in front of you. And I think it really does give you an inside depth of the time that they were living in, and how that mindset that people had in that time still affects us today.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the Sandy Strong scrapbook for that first march. I mean, she saved, or her partner saved every single scrap of information and put it into this scrapbook. And it really gives you, I mean, almost a play-by-play, like basically a TikTok of that event. And, and it was, I mean, it's fascinating and kind of beautiful.
It is, because I've been teaching and talking about that 87 March on Washington for like 15 years. But it wasn't until I looked at that scrapbook that I realized that there's so many more like layers to it. Like that, there's a section in there about anti-racism that was written for white people by Black queer people. And it's like, what the hell? Like, how did I not know that this was a part of the planning for this march? And you're right. Like I've only ever seen it in that scrapbook.
Yeah, that intersectionality coming through in the 1987 is, I mean, it's really inspiring and also kind of like, oh, we've been having this conversation for like 30 years and plus, and how has it evolved? What does it look like now? What did it look like then? The fact that it was, included in that material was really a revelation.
Yeah. Well, what has been the community's response so far? Like LGBT people or people coming in to ask for materials? Like, what have you seen?
We have several grad students coming in, looking to write dissertations on, queer topics. And then there have been kind of, it feels like courses built up around the fact that we have this material now. So they built a class around it. And I think 2 universities in town now have queer history classes, and they use our material to try and for their undergrad students. It has been a little bit difficult, is not the right word. It's been a learning experience trying to get undergrad students to realize the difference between a narrow topic and a broad topic and what they can find in our current collection. They have, ambitious goals coming in, and it's real sweet, but I mean, it also gives us a chance to teach how to use an archives and whether or not you can come in with your topic, or if you should come in first and find your topic.
Right.
Well, one of the things that we've heard over and over, we've seen those reports about how library use is actually really up. People are using libraries heavier than they have in a long time, but archives aren't necessarily getting the same kind of increase, because I still think that there's some mysterious, like, oh, this artifact that you can't touch and you have to have a secret password and all that sort of stuff to get in. So how, if somebody wanted to come see these collections, you know, once we're able to human again, like, what would that look like, Catherine? How would they go about doing that?
Well, okay, so that data across the board is true. I don't think it's true for our archives. Our archives has seen an uptick in people coming in, partially because we have those property records, and they are required if you want to get a historic marker on your house. So there's that, as well as our acquisitions in the queer community, in the environmental community. That kind of material has boosted our attendance. That's not the right word. Our patronage. But if you want to come in, all you have to do is come in during business hours. We're a public library. We are here to, or when we are there, we're here to help people and provide access. That is, I take more of an access giving approach to archives, not a gatekeeper approach. I am not there to protect archives. I'm there to help you get to them. So yeah, you can call ahead of time if you want. You can write me an email ahead of time if you want, and I can pull files for you, and they'll be ready when you get there. But you can also just walk in and say, hey, I want to look at this, and I will pull it for you. And then, you know, the process of expanding that research beyond the file that you wanted to create a more holistic view of your topic, that's also what we're there for. You know, especially when Connor's there, because he processed all those collections and he knows what's in there. He's a great resource.
How many collections have you processed, Connor?
Oh man.
All of them?
I think it's 6. Did you process 6 collections?
Let's see,
I'm pretty sure.
I think it's about 5 or 6. Maybe
I think
7.
it's between 6 and 8, including the digitization. You know, he processed that half of that Marge Ragona collection, which was, I think, 14 boxes, which it might be more. It was excessive.
15 boxes if you include the stuff I digitized. So I think it's about 15.
And that's not even done yet, because now we have the photos.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Woo, fun time. I think that you know, what you're talking about, Catherine, about people coming in, and it really shows the work that y'all put in to be accessible. You know, Josh and I often talk about, if you're not accessible, then you're just hoarding. You're keeping stuff in a box for no purpose. And y'all do a really great job making sure that the community, I mean, you're situated perfectly downtown, and you know, there's always people in there. We go into lots of archives, and sometimes they're just empty every time we go in. But y'all, every single time we've been there, there's been a couple of people working in your archives, looking at things. So y'all really do a great job connecting with community in ways that I think a lot of people want to do, but don't necessarily know how to do as good of a job as they'd like to.
Well, and it is intimidating for a lot of people to, especially if you have to make an appointment, and there's this idea of having to wear gloves and only looking at one piece of paper at a time. And that's not conducive to real research. It's not conducive to community building. And it's not what modern archives are about anymore. I mean, that may have been the case, 15, 20 years ago, but now, or I guess longer, but now it's about, creating an environment where people can learn and be able to access the information they need. And that's my job. I'm not there to, put strict rules on you. I mean, there are rules, but they're not to prohibit people from, they shouldn't be prohibitive, is what I'm saying. They are there to create we're there to create an atmosphere of learning and curiosity.
When I think people think that archives are prohibitive, I mean, I don't know if it's because that's an implication or like archives are not doing a good job of talking about their mission. But I think you're right. Some of it is just sort of this like old school versus, community, because we're a community project. I mean, that's what IHP is. We want the community in the collections. We want you to see them. And I think, you're right. Like Connor the work that he's doing to process the collections is so crucial to getting the excitement built up, because you do want someone, like you said, if a student walks in and says, I want to write a paper about left-handed lesbians, you're like, that's not really a thing. Like, we don't do that. But if you have someone who's familiar with the collections that can say, actually, you should look at these things because there's this really cool wealth of information about lesbian organizing in Birmingham or whatever. And I think, to me, as someone who's been in archives for a long time, like that's the part I feel is missing when I go to see materials myself. And then I'm jumping to the hoops, but I know how the hoops work. And I'm always thinking like, oof, like that would have stopped 12 people back there.
And that's why we encourage like professors at the major universities in town to bring their, historians craft people or classes into the archives. Or, I mean, we'll even go there and talk about how it works, what we have, how to create a research topic that will, be fruitful for you when you come into the archives. And that's part of our community building. That's part of our outreach goals, is to create a more comfortable idea of archives, so that, you lower that barrier. And I mean, so these 20-year-old kids can come in and feel confident in using primary resources as opposed to their normal, I read a book on this.
Right. In primary document, my students love primary documents. They love to read stuff that was written by queer people with their own hands in their own locations, because it does add that personal connection that I think is missing from a lot of historical research.
Absolutely.
Connor, I want to ask, like you had mentioned before that in some of the collections were really surprising because of the depth, the emotional depth of the material. But like, what do you think that you personally have learned about the local queer community that you just were not expecting? Is that too big a question?
No, I think it's a good question. I'm trying to think. I guess my perception of it might be a little bit different. I grew up with two babysitters that were an LGBTQ couple in Birmingham. So going into this, it was almost like a reaffirmation, I guess, of what I'd already known. Like, I mean, these are real people. And I think with maybe not so much now, I think things have been improving, but before that, I think a lot of it was very kind of tucked away. People didn't talk about it. And this, I mean, Invisible Histories and the stuff that I've been processing, it's really kind of putting that into the front. It's making it very visceral. It's making it available for people who are not just in that community, but people who are outside of that community. So I guess what I kind of felt was it's just very interesting to see people's lives. And it's a very, very distinct reminder that, I mean, we're people. People are people. And everyone has like hopes, they have dreams, they have things they want to do. Especially with some of the first things I processed, which were journals. A lot of it were very simple, but they were like little notes of like, hey, I went to Germany. This is what we saw today. And you really get to see that, you get the sense of these people. And I think that's some of the best parts of history and about being able to look at these primary source documents, is you get to see them as people. You don't have any other type of labels in front of that. They're just people, and you get to experience that. So I think that was like the best part about working with these collections, is that you get the sense of people.
I'm gonna cut in there.
Yeah.
I would say that one of the more surprising, sorry, she's very upset. Oh, sorry. One of the more surprising things that I saw was the inclusion of queer establishments in the city of Birmingham and how early they were documented in some of these publications in the back there, like the queer version of the Green Book kind of idea. I had no idea that there were so many, first of all, so early, and that they would document them so publicly.
Right.
That was really surprising.
Yeah, folks were posting their personal phone numbers in public, just sending it out because, people wanted to connect and have that kind of community. And we're giving, we've got flyers to house parties with like graphic directions on you turn at the pink house and then there's a big tree and, those Southern style directions. And
yeah.
And it was very, public, but also hidden at the same time. It's a real mix of like what people were doing to connect with other people that we don't really see now, I don't think, like people giving up that kind of information.
Yeah, and I think it's the early 70s. Some of those publications have, like, this is a bar that you can go to and meet people like you. Like, that seems really fraught.
Yeah, and niche like you. Like Josh is always talking about how like in the 70s, especially in the 80s, like there were so many more gay bars and establishments that really catered to different specific communities within the queer community too.
Yeah.
So way more diverse than we kind of give it credit for.
Absolutely.
But I love the idea of a denim gay bar, right? Like that, like we think of these things as sort of like fetishes, like people do leather or whatever. But I love the idea that there's just a bar that caters to people who are into denim. Like, yes, where is that bar?
Very practical. Feels very 90s though, even though it's
feels very Southern.
Yeah, right.
It really does. If it was an overall bar, sure.
Yes.
Or Canadian, I guess.
Very Letterkenny.
Very Letterkenny. Yes, definitely. Well, Catherine, I think the last thing I want to ask you is like, Megan and I would sort of jokingly say we like to vision like where we're going. Where do you think we could be going with our partnership with BPL? Like, what do you imagine we could be doing with this material that maybe we're not currently doing?
I would say our dream, aside from being the premier source for LGBTQ material in the state of Alabama, which I think we are on track for, is collecting more personal family histories, more intimate looks into the community, and starting to build exhibits and research. I'd love to see some dissertations come out of this. I'd love to see some books come out of this. That's where I would love to see this partnership go, and maybe make a case for needing more space for our facility based on the amount of acquired material that we get from IHP.
Yeah.
That would be the ideal. I think that's every archive's ideal.
Like a big 100,000 square foot space that we could put our stuff in.
Oh man, dream big.
I know. Let's just dream big. Why not? We're making all this up as we go anyway.
Yeah.
That's all we can do right now is dream. So let's just. Well, so in the description box, we'll make sure to link, because y'all have some stuff digitized where people can see. There's some newspapers, some different things that y'all have got. And we'll link to that. We've been sharing on our social media, but we'll put that in the description box. If you're interested in donating your materials or in researching and talking about that, I'll put IHP's contact email in the description box as well. You can reach out to us and we can connect you with the right people. Any kind of last remarks or things you want to know, or just last grasp of humanity before we before we end the thing today?
No, I just want to thank you and Josh for, partnering with us and bringing us in. It's been a very rewarding experience, and I look forward to seeing you guys in person again one day.
Yeah, me too. That'd be really nice.
Sure.
Well, thanks, y'all. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank y'all so much. Y'all have a great day.